Hi, Dr. Gilbert. Thank you so much for sitting here with TRT today. I'd like to cover a few things with you today regarding your experience, your longstanding experience in Gaza, your views as you've already articulated to some extent in the independent media about Western media and its preoccupation, as I believe you call it, with covering certain aspects of Gaza's medical facilities, and finally, your view on the role of Palestinian civilians in sustaining human life. So, you've been going to the occupied territories since at least the late 80s, and I'm wondering if you can shed light on how the current situation in Gaza is particularly different from perhaps anything you've seen.
Assalamu alaikum, Paul. Thank you for having me. Where should we start? I think for anyone who knows the Palestinian struggle and the brutality of the Israeli occupation of Palestine, there is not much new to the way they are exercising their power and their oppression and their brutality. But the magnitude of the attacks and the extent of the destruction of Gaza and the killing, of course, has never been seen before. And then we're not talking about only Palestine and the occupation army of the Israeli state, but in world history for the last century, I don't think there has been any military attack on another people with such a brutal, systematic viciousness and brutality. The number of civilians killed is shocking. The number of children killed is beyond shocking. It's probably around 12,000 Palestinian children, and children by definition are young people from 0 up to 18 years. This number of killed children is surmounting anything that the occupation forces have done before. So there is a shift towards much more killing of civilians, although they have always been targeting civilians when they attack Gaza and also the West Bank. The extent of destruction of the society is beyond anything we have seen before. They are completely shattering the whole civilian Palestinian society in northern Gaza in particular. I mean, schools, universities, water pipelines, sewage systems, homes, not to forget, hospitals, primary healthcare clinics, ambulances. We've seen all these things being targeted before, but never to the extent now. Now northern Gaza looks like a desert, or like Hiroshima. And also racism, the overt racism in the arguments for the attacks on Gaza and the West Bank. I don't think we have heard that before. Just 2 days ago, the Knesset, all the Jewish members of the Knesset voted against a two-state solution. Basically, they voted against any solution on how to solve this occupation, because this is not a difficult conflict. Everybody used to say, oh, such a difficult conflict, I can't make a stand. This is a difficult occupation, and occupations are illegal.
Doctor, you've talked about how before October 7th, the medical system within Gaza was already severely compromised by Israel. I'm wondering if you can speak to when you noticed that. Was that before or after the blockade, for example? And whether you think governments internationally, when you first noticed that, were doing enough to address that situation?
You know, the Palestinian people, as I know them, and I had my first medical travel to work with the Palestinian people in 1981, when I went as a young resident of anesthesiology, which is my specialty, and emergency medicine. I went to Beirut because the Israelis were bombing Beirut. Because at that time in 1981, the PLO and Fatah, which was the armed wing of the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, they were the ones who were waging the armed struggle against the occupation of Palestine. And just as a footnote, your viewers should not forget that any occupied people have the legal right to fight occupation with arms. The armed struggle against occupation is not terrorism. It is liberation, and liberation is legal. That's how we got rid of colonization of the global south. Of course, that armed struggle has to take place within the framework of international law, protecting hospitals, protecting children and women and civilians, not attacking schools, all of these laws that we have in the Geneva Convention, the Hague Convention, and so on. But within that framework, every nation who is occupied by another nation has the right to fight occupation. And the last one to say this was the spokesperson for the Chinese Minister of Foreign Affairs in the UN, which was quite a big thing. It was 2 days ago. And he really put the right thing on the right place. He said, what's going on in Gaza, it's not terrorism. And between the lines, he actually said that terrorism is what the Israeli occupation army is perpetrating. So what the Palestinians have been struggling with through all these years, since '48, is to find a strategy and a way out of this unwanted, unwelcome division of their land in '48, and then the unwanted and unwelcomed expansion, brutal expansion of the settler colonial Israeli project, which is embedded in the Zionist political movement, that they want to occupy and take all Palestine, from the river to the sea. That's the Israeli flag, the 2 blue lines. It's from the river to the Mediterranean. And between there you have the emeritus Israel, the state of Israel. So what I saw in Beirut in 1981 and 82 were 2 things. Number one, the Israeli army tried to kill the leadership of PLO and Fatah. Because at that time, that was Hamas. That was the armed resistance against the occupation and the colonization. So they bombed Fakahani in '81. We went down with the team. It didn't take so long with the bombing, so we worked there for a short while in a refugee camp. But then in 1982, Israel invaded Lebanon, went all the way up to West Beirut, besieged West Beirut, as they have been doing with Gaza for the last 16 years. They cut the water, they cut the fuel, they cut the medical supplies, they cut the food supplies, as they are doing with Gaza. And they bombed West Beirut relentlessly, night and day, for the whole summer of 1982, in order to achieve 2 things. To kill the leadership of the armed resistance, as they are doing in Gaza now. They called them terrorists. Abu Ammar, Yasser Arafat was a terrorist. Abu Shihad was a terrorist by definition of the US and the Israelis. And they wanted to reduce or to quell or to strangulate the will of resistance of the Palestinian people. Because remember, in Lebanon there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Palestinian refugees from '48 who have the right to return. They are living in a very, very difficult situation in the camps in Rashidi, in Sabra, in Shatila, in Burj Barashan, and so on, all over Lebanon, and they resist. So in '82, I saw 2 important things, and I felt it, and I smelt it, and I touched it. The brutality of the Israeli attacks on civilians. We were wading in blood. I was, for the first time in my life, lifting away amputated arms and legs from young Palestinians and Lebanese. And they showed no mercy. They bombed ambulances, they bombed hospitals, they bombed apartment buildings, they bombed the water pipeline, the sewage system, everything in the civilian society that upholds life. And I was shocked. I came from Norway. I was pretty naive. I'm politically very active, but at the same time, I thought there were rules of engagement. Not at all. Not for the Israelis, supported by the US and Pentagon. And then I saw the Palestinian healthcare system, and the doctors and the nurses, and Dr. Fatih Arafat, who at that time, the brother of Yasser, who was then the leader of the Palestine Red Crescent Society, Hilal, who was an informal Minister of Health. And I was extremely impressed by the way they improvised, found solutions. We made a makeshift field hospital in an underground garage in the Near East School of Theology. a Catholic school, and we worked there together night and day to save lives. So going from 82, and my experience then with the Palestinians and the healthcare, to Gaza and to the West Bank, it's important to remember that the Palestinian people has always been the most educated people in the Middle East. They're very thirsty for knowledge, very hardworking young students. Each family takes great pride in their kids having the best marks, and they have national tests, you know, and 100 point, if you score 98, 95, 97, family is very proud. You know, in Gaza, it's actually prohibited to have weddings, parties, celebrations. I think it is the week before national tests. Isn't that beautiful? Because the students should have quiet, should not be noise and, you know, shooting in the air, because they concentrate for their national exams. So the Palestinian people has always been very academic, very well educated, knowledgeable about philosophy, religion, medicine, whatever, technology, and they've built their universities. And often when I lecture about Gaza in the United States, I always ask, do you know, are there universities in Gaza? And everybody goes, no, they don't have universities, do they? You know, they have 10.
So while you've seen so much in your time in the occupied Palestinian territories, when do you feel that a doctor, at what moment do you feel that a doctor knows that they have to reach out to the international community and say, we need people, we need governments, we need people of conscience to intervene here? Notwithstanding all their training and all their capability, would you say there's a moment when a doctor recognizes that we can't do it?
You mean a Palestinian doctor? Or any doctor?
Any doctor who is in the territory.
It's a good question. I think the Palestinians would actually answer you by saying, we want to manage ourselves. You know, we're proud people. We're building a good healthcare system for our Palestinian fellow women and men and children. We don't want to be dependent. We're not a begging society. We're independent and proud, and we know our medical stuff and we know how to run it. But when you have an occupier who systematically kills your doctors and nurses and paramedics, and who systematically bomb your hospital, of course there is a time when you have to say, hello world, can you please stop these people from killing our medical staff and destroying our hospitals, which should be protected according to your laws? Of course there is a moment for that. And they do it. In 1981, Fatih Arafat issued an appeal to European and Western doctors to come to Beirut to assist them. That appeal made us in Norway construct the first emergency surgical team that I was on. So that appeal has been coming again and again and again from Palestinian healthcare authorities. So I think the moment is overripe, and has been so for many years. And the Palestinians are indeed appealing again and again and again to the international community. Lift the siege, stop the attacks on healthcare, improve the living conditions, because at the end of the day, your health and my health is not first and foremost depending on a fancy ambulance helicopter like I work in, or a big university hospital with flashing operating rooms and open heart surgery and all that. Public health depends on what we have here. Clean water, food, enough to eat, safety, that we are not attacked, somebody comes there and shoot us, a place to live, work, paid and safe work, education, and then comes healthcare. And the occupation of Palestine and the living conditions for the people in the diaspora, the refugees, is first and foremost not characterized by the lack of fancy ambulance helicopters. They know the rule of conduct, they know international law. If the hospitals had been military command centers, I don't think they would have allowed it. Full stop. So I haven't seen it, show me the evidence, and finally the Israeli occupation army invaded Shifa after having strangulated, bombed, shelled, killed people inside. And what did they find? Nothing. They made fools of themselves. Now everybody says, oh, we cannot, the Palestinian society asked for BDS, boycott, divestment, sanctions. And then all the Western society said, no, we can't do that with Israel. Well, they did with Russia immediately after the invasion of Ukraine. But what people forget is that Israel, the occupier, had been imposing economical sanctions on Palestine for many, many years. And in 2006, after the election, they immediately closed off the economical ties and the transfer of money and taxes and tolls and everything to the West Bank, and they besieged Gaza. Can you think of any more brutal BDS than the siege of Gaza? So actually, these fundamental things, water, food, income, work, housing, education, is denied the people of Palestine by the occupiers. So we cannot solve that only by making more healthcare. So I'd just like to make that point first, because I'm sort of a hospital specialist. But then on the other hand, of course, what we have seen over the years, this very systematic strategy from the Israeli occupation forces to demolish Palestinian proper healthcare. And that has been at a level unseen before during these 4 months. And this last WHO report shows from each of the municipalities, there are 5 municipalities in Gaza. It's Rafah, Khan Yunis, Deir Balla, Gaza City, and North Gaza. And here you see the number of hospitals that have been attacked and destroyed. And out of 34 hospitals, I believe now it's 6 or 8 that are partially operating. Imagine a state demolishing 75% of the hospitals in a neighboring country without any repercussions or reactions from the international community? Why is Israel having this sacred position that they cannot be blocked or punished like they are, eagerly punishing Russia very quickly with sanctions and political, punishment?
Yes, that's a very good point. There's so many hospitals that Israel's already destroyed, but as I believe you've remarked before, there's this, I think you used the word preoccupation with Al-Shifa and how it's a distraction. And I wonder if you can elaborate on that, and whether you see it as an example of something bigger that the Western media is trying to do deliberately.
In a way, the Western power elite, I'm not talking about the people of the West, because the people of the West in Canada and United States, in Europe, in Norway, they have been unanimously, the majority standing up and saying we support Palestine. But the governments have been very slow to recognize that. They are pretty scared now because the street is so powerful, and the shout from the streets of all the capitals, of all the cities, all over the Western world is shouting, impose sanctions, stop the killing, support Palestine. But the Western powers have always been looking for scapegoats, finding excuses to support the Israeli attacks on Palestinians. One thing is to label them terrorists, and that's like the thief crying, shouting, stop the thief. Because the real terrorist in this scenario is the state of Israel. Israel is perpetrating state terrorism by definition, using arms, military powers to intimidate and scare the civilian population. That's the definition of terrorism. Who's doing that? Israel. Over and over and over again. So the Western powers, the governments, try to find excuses, labeling people. And then, maybe this hospital, this Shifa hospital, is a military command center. So then it's okay to bomb it. Number one, it's not okay to bomb a mixed civilian and military target. Geneva Convention. Number 4, there are 3 important principles. It's proportionality. You should use the same level of weaponry and power against your enemy as the enemy is using against you. I mean, that's every day. If you're gonna punish your child and you're an adult, you can't take a bat and start beating the child. You have to, maybe hold him by the arm and say, you can't do this. So that's proportionality. Then it is distinction, which means that the armed parties have to make a clear distinction between civilian and military targets. Like you can't bomb a school, you can bomb a military air force base. Distinction. And then the important principle of precaution, which means that if you have a target which you think is military, but it is also possibly a civilian target, like a church or a mosque, and there are 500 refugees in the church or in the mosque, and there may be 2 armed fighters. You cannot bomb that mosque just because you want to kill those 2 fighters, because the civilian protection takes priority over the military gain. So even if there should be some fighters in Shifa, which I've never seen, they still don't have legal arguments to bomb Shifa. That's one thing. And number 2, we have heard these allegations for years and years and years and years. I heard it first time in 2006, we heard it in 2009 and 12. The Israelis said, we're going to bomb Shifa because it's a military command center. We were even asked to leave by our Minister of Foreign Affairs because the Israeli authorities had contacted the Norwegian Minister of Foreign Affairs and said, you have to get your 2 doctors out of Shifa. Why did they want to get us out of Shifa? Because they didn't want us to report. Because we reported, we were treating patients together with our Palestinian colleagues and leaders, but we were also reporting. We gave interviews to anyone who wanted to listen. And we could give the numbers. I remember I had this as my notepad. So I had the numbers of killed and injured and children and women and everything from hour to hour. So we were important sources of information about what is it that's really going on in Shifa and in Gaza. They wanted us out for that reason. They made the excuse that we're going to bomb it because it's a military command center. We refused, we stayed, they didn't bomb. And now it comes up again, the same allegations, 16 years after they first claimed that Shifa was a military command center. Where is the proof? Where is the evidence? They've had 16 years with all their sophisticated intelligence and X-raying and everything. They never showed any proof. They made a tunnel when they were in Gaza during the Intifada. And another practical thing is that there is almost no modern hospital in this world that doesn't have a system of tunnels underneath, because it's for logistics, it's all for the technical support, it's for the, the generators maybe, or the batteries for the unbreakable power supply, it's for the laundry and the kitchen and so on and so forth, and to transport patients between the different departments and blocks. So that's nothing new that there are tunnels under hospitals. And the third point, I've never seen it. I've been there for the better part of 20 years. I've been working there during times of bombing and in between. Remember, there are no borders around Gaza. Israel, which is not very known, Israel has no internationally recognized borders. If you discuss with somebody who's pro-Israeli, give them a piece of paper and a pencil and ask them to draw the borders of Israel and Gaza. They don't exist because they're pushing them all the time. So when these 2.2 million people are incarcerated, they tried the civilian, protest to go to the fence every Friday for 1.5 years. What happened? They killed hundreds by shooting them, and they wounded tens of thousands, mainly by shooting in the extremities to make them, handicapped. So why would not these people at one point break out of the ghetto? I don't call it a prison, because in prison you have convicted people, and you cannot convict 2.2 million Palestinians of being Palestinians.
And one thing before we wrap up, I want to ask you, without of course romanticizing it because of what we're seeing is so horrific, there seems to be among the civilian population in Gaza this kind of exceptional selflessness to help the medical staff and the rescue team that I personally have never seen before. And I'm not sure if that's the right word, selflessness, but it's a kind of remarkable compassion that I've not seen, and courage and strength. And I'm wondering, in your experience, what do you think accounts for that? And I feel that it, as a Western person, it forces me to interrogate myself, because coming from a culture of the West where there's so much of a championing of individualism, whereas you see that, which is the total opposite. So I'm just wondering, what do you feel accounts for that kind of selflessness and courage that's so remarkable?
I'm so happy for that question, Paul, and I've been asking myself the same, having stayed so much together with the Palestinians, and in particular in Gaza over the last 20 years. And I don't only go there when it's bombing, I go 2-3 times a year. I teach at the university, I do research together with my fellow Palestinians. I work with development of healthcare under the leadership of the Palestinian healthcare leaders like Dr. Youssef Abarish, the brilliant Minister of Health. And every time we face a problem, there is always a solution around the corner in Gaza. Every time there is some sort of hardship, there is always some helping hands, as you say. I am a hopeless romantic. So I like to think that this is part of our universal human quality. It is to come to the assistance of the other when the other is for some reason helpless, incapacitated, have a problem, is poor, lacks food, or needs to be lifted up and cared for. But again, the political forces that wants to divide us through racism and say that, oh, you're brown and I'm white, I'm not going to touch you. Or you're yellow and I'm white and you can be poor and I can be rich. These political forces are trying to divide us and trying to exploit this quality of human being, of the existence, into some sort of profit. But at the core, I think all of us have this internal spine of dignity and solidarity with others. I want to think that, I want to believe that, and I want to promote that, and I want to be a person like that myself, with a spine of dignity and solidarity and love for others. Racism, apartheid, occupation are exactly the opposite. It is to disregard the value of human life. Now, for the Palestinian people, I think it is a virtue to be selfless, to be supportive of the other. And they have a name for it. In Arabic, it's called sumud. And sumud actually is an Arab word meaning steadfastness. And this steadfastness is part of Palestinian culture. There's no doubt. And there is no doubt that both in the West Bank and in Gaza and in the camps around the world, when you meet Palestinian people, they're all in a way filled with a sense of being in this world also not just for yourself, but for the other. And you see it during times of hardship and bombing. And I totally agree. When you look at the video clips from Gaza, when you see a bombing take place, of course people try to find cover. But immediately when the bombing is over, you don't see people run away. You see them run into the smoke. And they start digging with their hands immediately. Why do they dig with their hands? Because Israel does not allow any fuel to come in, so they can't use the cranes and the machinery. But you see them digging anyway, with and without their vests. You see them lifting carefully the injured, the dying, the dead, the martyrs into an ambulance or running them into a hospital. Endless actions of compassion, solidarity, and sumud. And this is also, I think, a lesson to the world, a message to the world, a cry to the world. We are maintaining our dignity. We are not allowing ourselves to degenerate to the animals that they are treating us like. And not only are they treating like animals, but they're even naming them as animals. The Palestinians resist. And they stand tall in their dignity and their humanity with their sumud. And it is, as you say, extraordinary. And we all should take a lesson from Gaza and from the West Bank. We should take a lesson from Dr. Mohammed Al-Ron, from Dr. Nafez Karim, from Dr. Khalil, and from all the other healthcare workers, and the people, and the volunteers, and the ambulance paramedics, because they are actually telling us what it means to be human. In times of the utter hardship, confronted with death, confronted with starvation, losing your child, they stand tall and they ask themselves, when it's bombing, how can I be of help for the other? So the Israeli occupation, the Israeli attack has completely failed in trying to discourage or demoralize the Palestinian people in Gaza and in the West Bank. The more they're bombed, the taller they stand. The more they are starved, the more they show compassion for each other. And even if they're dropping leaflets and made up Arab newspapers or news leaflets saying that, oh, you have to attack Hamas, they are responsible. They cut through it because they are all part of the resistance. Even if they're Fatah or they're Hamas or they're Jihad or they're socialists or Muslims or Christians, this is not a Muslim cause. This is not a political cause. This is a cause for humanity. And the Israeli attacks on Gaza and in the West Bank, these attacks are attacks on all of us, on a platform of dignity, humanity, and justice in this world. If we don't react now, how is it going to look tomorrow? Who's next? Is it Turkey? Is it Lebanon? Is it Jordan? Is it Norway? Because if we let this loose now, might will define right, and right will not define right. And when we let might define right without stopping it, we are going back to the law of the jungle, and I don't want to live in that world. So we should thank the Palestinian people for their steadfastness, their sumud, and their enormous courage and bravery in standing up. We all have a lot to learn from the Palestinian people in Gaza and in the West Bank. And my deepest respect and my thank goes out to them. I wish I could do more. I wish I could be there. I am refused, I'm denied access by the Israeli occupiers because I'm too dangerous. I wish I could be there and do more, but I will promise, like we all should promise ourselves, we will do more here. We have to do more solidarity work. We have to do more to push our governments to take a stand. We have to do more to have financial, economical blockade of Israel and political sanctions against Israel. We have to have weapon embargo on Israel, and you and me and all of us who are only one, we can stand together and be an army of solidarity for the Palestinian people. And at the end of the day, that is a struggle for you and for me and for everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.